What's the biggest online myth about booking the LCR train? What months should you avoid visiting? How much cash will you need for your day-to-day spending? What's the one safety tip you should keep in mind? And where's the best locations to book your hotel, and more? Here are 8 do's and don'ts, common mistakes, and best suggestions for anyone thinking of visiting Laos, specifically Vientiane, Vang Vieng, and Luang Prabang. If you can be flexible, do not visit Laos during burning season. This is also a general rule around this part of Southeast Asia and something you should always check before booking. Burning season is when farmers use controlled burning to prepare their fields for a new year of planting. This results in a toxic gas which can ultimately be harmful to your lungs, but also ruins any views you might have enjoyed. It's unpleasant, and there's just a sense of incoming apocalypse about it. And I don't just mean because nowadays people seem to be more stupid. There are no fixed burning season dates each year, but it loosely starts around mid-February, with March being particularly bad, ending around mid-April. Again, these dates can fluctuate by a few weeks either side. Instead, generally the best months and peak season to visit are November and December, going into early January, as these are the most dry. I visited very late October, but most of my time took place in early November. And although it did rain a little and I had a few skies that weren't as pleasing on the eye, getting in before the true high season kicked off seemed to work out pretty well. Visiting during the wet season isn't crazy though. It'll be a lot more quiet, with cheaper accommodation and with much more lush greenery, arguably putting it at its most beautiful. So if you're happy to take the small gamble, accept some rainy days, and be okay with less available activities, you shouldn't rule out the rainy season completely, especially if it works out for you date-wise. Next, do be prepared for either getting an e-visa beforehand or know what you need to bring if you're applying for a visa on arrival instead. Personally, I suggest going for the e-visa in advance since it skips the longer entry time and is easier to process. But let's cover both. First, for the e-visa, it's just the standard online application that you'd expect. They need at least 3 working days to approve, but I'd advise doing it earlier. There's also a relatively new LDIF, which is just a digital arrival card, like the ones you might normally fill in on a plane. For the LDIF, after completion, you're given a QR code to show on arrival, and the e-visa will be emailed to you once approved, which you just print out. This usually means you'll breeze through immigration with a dedicated queue and be on your way pretty quickly without any hassle. Alternatively, you can absolutely do both the visa and arrival cards in person and with no preparation, so don't worry if this is all last minute. The positive is it's $10 cheaper to do so in person, but you will probably be waiting longer. Tips to help you through is to bring enough US dollars in cash and with notes that are of good enough quality to be accepted. It's suggested to also bring along a passport-sized photo to help speed things up, but they can also just take a photo of you instead for a small fee. Do double check your own government travel page for more personal, nuanced information about this, and please do not ask me any immigration questions in the comments, because the response, "Suitcase Monkey said it was okay," just won't work at passport control. And believe me, I've tried, without success. Across Vientiane, Vang Vieng and Luang Prabang, my hotel costs averaged £25 per room per night, mostly with breakfast included, although you can still absolutely find lots of places cheaper if you're on a stricter budget. Since I was travelling solo and my room costs weren't shared between 2, I was mostly looking for simple, clean options, but still always centrally located and well reviewed. If you're wanting to spend a little more for a much more comfortable stay, you can quite easily find something around £50 a night for a good moderate stay, or maybe £80 in Luang Prabang, which is the most pricey of the 3. And higher end hotels start around £90–100 plus if you want to really treat yourself. Of the 3 locations I visited, I did find that your money stretches the furthest in Vang Vieng, so if you wanted to go a bit more luxury at least once, this is a good area to do so and without breaking the bank. In terms of finding the best locations for each, for Vientiane, I'd be looking anywhere within this area if you want to be central. Vang Vieng is pretty small, so you can't really go wrong, but this is where the action is, so either north or south would be quieter, but still walkable. And for Luang Prabang, anywhere near the old UNESCO town would be my preference, so around the peninsula, but the more peaceful side is nearer towards the end. As always, I've linked a bunch of suggested budget, moderate and higher end options via the description or QR code if you want to take a look. Do not leave it until the last minute to book your seat on the LCR train. This new train route has made getting around northern Laos much easier. However, since there's no official website to clearly state the facts, the internet is littered with out-of-date information that keeps echoing itself. But if you follow these simple steps, it is a pretty super easy process. Seats must be reserved in advance, and the best way to book them is through the official LCR ticket app. However, the biggest barrier you'll see online is people incorrectly saying that you need a local Lao phone number to make a booking. This is no longer true, and I know because I booked a test ticket just for the sake of this video. So when creating an account, just leave the phone number field blank and instead use your email address. Then booking a ticket literally is as easy as booking a ticket. Reservations are only available during Laos business hours, starting from 6:30 AM, and it doesn't accept MasterCard. When I was there, tickets went on sale 3 days prior, but they're currently showing 7 days ahead, so just check the app for yourself. In terms of availability, this isn't the Eras tour, but some days they might only have 5 trains doing your journey, so again, I'd advise booking as soon as possible to avoid missing your preferred time slot. Unfortunately, the LCR Tickets app isn't available in some countries, so if this is the case for you, I'd next suggest contacting your hotel and see if you can book through them. This is actually what I did, because at the time I incorrectly believed that I needed a Lao phone number because the internet said so. The hotel only charged me an extra 100,000 kip, or £3.50 for the convenience, and that included a 15-minute private taxi ride to the station as well, so it's still a viable option. I'm actually going to be releasing a dedicated LCR train booking tips video over on Carry On Monkey, our second YouTube channel, with a few more tips for traveling that I haven't mentioned in this video, so I'll share that at the end once it's ready. Do be careful if you decide to go tipsy tubing in Vang Vieng, which for those who haven't seen my previous video of things to do in Laos, it's a 3-hour long natural river where you're floating down on your own and for some reason without being given a life jacket. I personally loved it, and the risk factor hit the absolute sweet spot of being peaceful enough to enjoy the chill, but still with some mild danger to make me feel manly. It can get choppy, there are numerous branches and rocks sticking out of the water, so you do need to watch where you're going, but again, this added to the sense of adventure. The fact I took this route at the start of dry season did mean that the river was calmer than it can be, so do take double caution during wet season. And although it's called tipsy tubing, as there's a couple of bars near the start, which you can skip if you want to, I would absolutely avoid getting shit-faced because people can die. I did see some injured tourists around Vang Vieng, and although I can't be certain, it did look like the result of tubing, so there is a real danger here, so do have fun, but don't be a dick. Do make sure you always have some cash with you, as there will be many times where card is not accepted. So either bring some kip with you, or there's plenty of ATMs around which can charge around 30 to 40,000 kip to withdraw, and there's typically a max of 2 million kip per transaction. When your card is accepted at hotels or some restaurants, just be aware that there's usually a 3% charge added on top. To help budget for your day-to-day cash spending, not including hotels or a specific activity that you might book, I looked at all of my ATM withdrawals over my time here. And without trying to be frugal, the average spend came to 500,000 kip per day as a solo traveller, which is about £17 or $22 US. Over the whole trip, this covered most day-to-day purchases like some breakfasts, all lunches and dinners, typically in central tourist restaurants or cafes, a beer or two a day, an iced coffee or two a day, 3 massages, a 90-minute minivan transfer, 1 train ride, a handful of taxis, and entry fees for attractions, so it did cover quite a lot. Hotels, as mentioned, averaged around £25 per room, and an all-day activity with transport and lunch could be between £20 to £30 all in. The hot air balloon was $150 US, which again included transport, and I've linked all the companies that I used via the description and QR code. Day-to-day spending wise, you can absolutely do all of this for less. A restaurant evening dish can be found for 50,000 kip, which is less than £2. But if you're at the ATM on arrival and you'd likely be visiting some nice places as I did, 500,000 kip per day as a solo at least gives you a comfortable margin to start with, and you can see how your spending fits in from there. Laos is one of the safest feeling countries I've visited, and the relaxed calm is one of my favourite aspects. However, there's one safety tip that the vast majority of you won't be affected by, but I wanted to at least put it on your radar. And that's when drinking home-brewed spirits such as whiskey, or Lao Lao as it's known. Since home-brewed alcohol is by definition unregulated, there was, for example, a terrible situation a couple of years ago in Vang Vieng where one particular venue was adding methanol to their drinks, resulting in 6 deaths. So although this was one well-reported incident and by no means is a regular occurrence, it is recommended to only drink homemade alcohol from somewhere you can feel confident, or through an organised tour as we did. Or to stick to alcohol like beer Lao or imported spirits or wine, which are all regulated as usual. Transport-wise, you're spoilt for choice in terms of getting from A to B within the towns themselves. Of the 3 areas that I visited, the only time I really needed transport was in Vientiane, and the 2 apps that I used were LOCA and InDrive, but I ultimately found that InDrive was the easiest to use and it worked out great. So do download either of those in advance so you're ready to go. A 15-minute ride cost me around 30,000 kip in the capital and around 100,000 kip in Luang Prabang for a 15-minute ride to the airport. Vang Vieng is small enough that these apps aren't really needed, and tuk-tuks are the best way around here, so just speak to the driver and get an agreed price before taking. If you land into Vientiane, there is an airport bus, route number 44. As soon as you exit from baggage claim, turn left and there's an indoor ticket booth with a white and green bus icon. It's 40,000 kip, runs once an hour and travels all over the city. To be honest though, if there is 2 of you and the time doesn't quite match up, it's probably easier and maybe even cheaper to just take a cab instead, but it's an option nonetheless. Renting a motorbike is one of the best ways to get around. Just get your international driver's license and insurance sorted out beforehand. The prices that I was seeing advertised when I was there was around 200 to 250,000 kip per day. Laos is a very respectful country, so here is some cultural advice for not making any tourist faux pas. I actually found quite a few similarities between Laos and Japan, and maybe a lot of that stems from both being Buddhist and conservative countries. So, for example, do try to be quiet in public settings and just be mindful of others in general. If there's ever any issues with your hotel or restaurant, or you're stopped by the police when driving, showing signs of anger will generally be less successful than approaching the conversation in a polite tone. Outside of places where you might swim, bikinis or walking around topless is not a thing, and you should always dress appropriately when visiting temples. I wouldn't go drinking from the taps, but from my experience at least, all the ice used in cafes and restaurants were always safe to consume as it comes from bottled water. Next, as with many parts of the world where their plumbing isn't as capable, do not flush toilet paper in the restroom and instead use the bins provided. This can otherwise lead to costly damages for the establishment, and although it feels a little weird at first, I promise you it soon becomes second nature. As mentioned, Laos is a very laid-back country, and a common joke is that its official name, Lao PDR, doesn't actually stand for People's Democratic Republic, but instead stands for Please Don't Rush. So do keep this in mind when things don't run exactly to schedule. This is a cultural norm, and you'll enjoy your time much more here the sooner you can just go with the flow. Finally, 3 simple language phrases that are easy to remember but can go a long way. The first is sabaidi for hello, and this is something you'll hear all the time. Couple this with a gentle bow of the head and prayer gesture and you'll be a sabaidi master. Sabaidi. Kob chai is thank you, kob chai. Or if someone's offering something like a taxi and you want to say no thank you, it's bo kob chai for no thank you, bo kob chai. If you want to see how I spent my time during my 10 days in Laos, along with a full step-by-step guide for taking the train with some added things I haven't mentioned in this video, I'll link everything on screen and below. So until the next one, Kob Chai for watching, Suitcase Monkey.